let's start talking about what you've been doing for the last few years that has, I get it. It kind of, you get criticized for it a lot. I don't know how you deal with it because I would go crazy and be like, screw you guys. I'll just stop this. Uh, but you are the man behind the whole top 25 rankings. So,
Yep.
and I know you and Joseph get at it sometimes. Well, you're actually very patient because I couldn't deal. I would be like, like I said, screw you all. You don't like it, not my problem. But we have something. Uh,
Right.
which, and I get it. I kind of have I understand how it works. I don't fully understand how it works, but we'll get into that. But let's
Yeah.
talk about how and why you started this.
Sure. So when we from up here in the Northwest, we had our local hero, I guess. His name was Taylor Peterson, and he would go
Who's
to all
stupid
the
fast?
yeah, he was really fast. He was a full full factory like Kyosho guy for a while. He's ran for Mugen and Losi and
Yeah.
he was really good. So he would make all these mains. He would make the main pretty much for like a few years in a row. He made the main at every race he went to. He made it at nationals. He made it at Nitro Challenge, Silver State, all these things. And I'd go to some of these races and I'd race too and get smoked. But he would always people would always come up to him, all the other drivers, and be like, "Hey, dude, congrats! That's super cool that you made the main." Like it was his first time, and he'd be like, "Dude, like I make it every time. What the hell is this guy talking about?" And then like he never really ever got the respect I think that he deserved, especially with living up here and not being able to race against those guys on a weekly basis. He would show up cold turkey, Nitro Challenge when you can't even run here. It's his first time racing. At that time of year, you can't run at that time of year. First time racing, he would go down to Nitro Challenge and put it in the main. And so there was guys like him, and then there was like these other guys who are, we call them dark horses or whatever right now. But there was like a really good example was Josh Wheeler, because he would he would finish top 5 every single race ever, but he never got the respect because he never won. So no one ever put him in these categories of like, oh, so and so's good and da 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 da. He was never ever talked about. Similarly to Taylor. So I was just curious, and then the way it all started is I figured, all right, well, I'm going to take these races and then these main races, the Nitro Challenge, the Silver State, and the whatever, the Motorama or whatever big races. And I just took all the people that made those at those races, and then I just figured out what their average finishing position was at all those races. And then it was really interesting to me on where these people actually landed. You know what I mean? The people that are quote unquote were like the guys, you know what I mean? And then these other guys like the Wheelers and Taylors that were way, way up there that people would never even assume were there. Like I can't remember, there was one back in the day. I remember I was like, what the hell is
Bobby,
this guy doing there?
uh, he, well, Taylor and the guys were in that a lot of these guys don't even race anymore. Like Carson
Yeah,
Waynerman. Well, Josh Wheeler, I would consider one that people knew. He just kind of
yeah,
was at the end of his career. He wasn't racing anymore. He was at Silver State here the other day, and I got to
yeah,
talk to him. But Carson Waynerman, I know I'm saying his name wrong. Bobby Tillman.
yep.
These were those fast guys that would make
Matt
mains.
Gosh was another
Yeah,
one. He probably didn't get the respect that he
yeah.
deserved back then.
They would make these mains, but they were just like that one step like from getting a paycheck, I would say. So
Yeah, right, right. And so it was designed just because because I was curious. And then throughout that, I was talking to my brother about it, who's a big golf fan, and he's like, dude, you should do a ranking like the golf does. And I was like, well, it's golf, dude. But it's actually really, really similar in the fact that at the time and still, all these people race all over the country or all over the world, but they rarely are all in the same spot. So like how do you rank somebody when they're not racing each other? It's really difficult. And so we were talking about golf, and golf's really similar. Rarely do all the golfers show up, like 3 times a year maybe. They are all in one event. So I started researching how they did their rankings because I wasn't really familiar. And then I was like, it was like ready to be set up for RC because it's got different tiers. It uses the strength of field, of which I could figure that part out. And then the different tiers, so not every event's worth the same. Um, so I just tailored it basically directly off of that and scaled it back a little bit because there's just to keep the math slightly easier. There's a few things that weren't in there. And then I calculated that for the US originally, and then there was a lot of European guys in there, and then I was showing a few people, just around my area of what I had, and then I decided I wanted to do an actual world ranking because I already had some European dudes in there. So, I got a hold of a few international drivers, JQ being one of them, who didn't respond, but not a big deal.
No,
So I gotta hold that to him if he's talking trash.
Yeah,
That he never
good.
responded. He had his opportunity.
You probably would
But
have got one word answers anyway.
I know.
No,
It's
it's
all
so
good, though.
so aggravating.
Yeah, it's all good. But I contacted them originally because I had to start somewhere because you can't calculate the strength of field without having some kind of somewhere to start. So I started with all the obvious races in the US. Then I contacted some overseas drivers, found out all the contact some manufacturers and stuff, try and find out what races I should start with there. And then used that initial data for like a couple years, and getting these results was a pain, as it still is now. But um, getting all these results, then I originally started over. I used the same formula, but input all the numbers, so it was all over the exact same time, and then used that list or that initial ranking to to start, I guess, and use that for the strength of field to calculate strength of field. And then as it grew and got bigger and bigger and more events and the list of drivers got way longer, then it just became more and more accurate as far as strength of field goes. And then some races just pop up that you're like, oh, dude, I didn't even know that race was really that big a deal. So
Mhm.
that's kind of how it all evolved into what it is now. And then initially, everything it's over a rolling 2 year period. And all it is, a lot of people think it's way more complicated than it is, but realistically, at its core, all it is an average finishing position at qualified events. That's it. So the reason the numbers are what they are is just because you would have like you don't want to have like an average of like 2.335, you know, place. It makes no sense. So it's just switched into numbers where the numbers are bigger, which is the same way that golf does it. But it's just an average finishing position over a rolling 2 year period at qualifying events. And what dictates a qualifying event is the strength of field. That's it. It doesn't matter the name of the race. It doesn't matter the format. It doesn't matter anything. It's
Mhm.
purely off of who shows up.
Okay. So what is the minimum amount of drivers that qualifies the minimum amount of drivers in the top 25 that count towards make qualifying it to be a race?
So it doesn't actually work like that.
Okay.
What the way it works is, and that's kind of a misconception, although usually it takes about 6 or 7,
Mhm.
depends, because what it works is like the numbers that you see on the left hand side of the top 25 rankings. So that's like that dictates their average finishing position, basically. That number really.
Okay.
So all the way down through the top 50, through the top however many people, because every single person that goes to a race gets whatever they got at that race. So everyone's calculated. Of any race ever that anyone's ever been to that's counted towards the top 25. So it's not just people in the top 25 that affect whether that counts, because those people in the 30 to 50 range and all the way down, if you get enough of those guys, they're just as valuable
Mhm.
as, you know what I mean? Like 3 people with 20 points is just as valuable as 1 person with 60 points. You
Right.
know what I mean? Because it's just a deeper field. It's, I look at it like it's more dangerous for a racer if they screw up, and there's a lot of those mid-level dudes, you're gonna you potentially are not making the main at that point. But you know, if it's a really shitty field outside of like those top 6 drivers, then I look at it like if you're a top 5 driver, a top 25 dude, there's zero reason why you shouldn't finish in the top 5 if there's 5 there. You know what I mean? But so it's everybody's calculated in, not just top 25 people. So you can't really say there's a
Right.
set number. And that's where RCGP, that's why that first one didn't count, because it's such a short field that they don't get any of those extra people helping it count. You know what I'm saying? So
I get that.
yeah, so it's a little bit tricky the way that works, but the other one did count because they had enough people that it didn't matter who else showed up.
Okay. How about I see like a lot of people like Martin Walenka, Yannick Igon, and these guys who don't race much. So I'm guessing the less you race, if you're on there, it helps you out, kind of.
Well, that depends on how you look at it, but yes and no. So because it's an average finishing position, right? So if you only have 3 inputs of data there,
Yes.
just using an extreme here, like if you do good in all 3, that's good. But if you screw one up, that one's going to hurt you more than if you had 15 inputs. You know what I mean? So racing less, like, yes, it kind of can. And if you do good in all of them, but
Yes.
having more events is always better and it's going to be more accurate. Like some of those things can get a little bit inaccurate, but it's also one of the downfalls to a ranking system and the way that it's set up. This is one of the biggest downfalls is similarly to golf or tennis, like Tiger Woods, when he went through all his stuff, he was still the world number 1 for like a year and a half.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are like, how's that even possible? And it's like, well, because all those events still he was so far ahead.
Right.
That all those, it takes a long time for all those to fall off because over the rolling 2 years, those things, an event from 2 years ago is still helping you or hurting you, depending on how you look at it. But until those drop off, then you start to see those people start to clock off, like Martin Walenka, for instance.
Right.
He's on his downward slide now because a lot of this stuff's starting to fall off. So you'll start to see him start dropping drastically.
Well, he's going to the Euros next week, supposedly, so he might do well. He might not drop.
I'm interested in that. That's one of my people that I'm interested. I think he could do some damage.
I like Walenka, man. He wears his heart in his shoulders. His heart in his shirt. He doesn't take any shit, and he's good. He's a really talented driver. He's older. And he's good. Actually,
and he's actually a good example too of like someone that like you wouldn't. Without on the rankings, there are people like, who's this dude? But if you really look it up, he always does well.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like it's really designed for those people. Everyone knows who the top 5 drivers are in the world.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like you can argue the order however you want, but realistically, it's not for those guys. It's for these other people. To see the CJ Jellins or the Ongaro before he really hit the map. You know what I mean? Like he was there and you could see it coming. A lot of people are like, where'd this guy come from? It's like, dude, if you pay attention, like I know you're a huge fan and you look at a ton of all the results all over, just like myself. And it's like, you could see that coming. It was no surprise if you paid attention.
I knew Ongaro was going to take the world by storm in 2015 when he did well at his own track. And I was like, then he went to the Nats, the Worlds, and people, that kid was so fast, but he just made so many mistakes. I was like, yep.
Yeah.
That's going to be a world champion. So said, so done. How long did all of this take to put together and then eventually put it out there?
So originally I had it going for, I think it was 2 years. I think I had it going 2 years after I made that initial thing so that it would kind of work itself out. And then at that point I was just doing it kind of on my side, on the just as a hobby, I guess, you know what I mean? Which it still is, but, and then I was showing some friends of mine that are racers, and they were like, dude, you should just make like a website or something, because there's nothing like that out there. And I was like, all right, well, screw it. So I did. And then that's when I released it. And then it just kind of went from there. And then people initially hated it and some people liked it. And then it depends on where people are on how they feel about it.
Yeah. When did you officially release it?
God, that's a good question. I was just trying to look on the Facebook thing. on the Facebook page because that's
Mhm.
right when I did it, and I don't know anymore to look on where it started. It's been a while though. I know
Yeah, it
that.
has. It has.
Yeah.
Joseph's ears must be ringing because he sent me a message. I said, "Yeah, I'm recording with you," and he goes, "Oh, I have a question for him." And he just says, "Why not push the RC world towards more of a series by naming the races that count for the top 25 before the season?" But I think you kind of explained that.
Yeah, and that's a really, really, really common question.
Mhm.
Having set events, right?
Mhm.
Like that's huge. However, to do that and to do it fairly, sort of, I guess, is like, well, then can you count like Roar Nationals or the Euros?
Mhm.
Because not everyone has the opportunity to go to that race.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? But then, okay, so if you say you don't count them, then so that's not going to factor into the driver's rate ranking at all. That doesn't, to me, that doesn't make any sense because that's a really hard thing to do
Right.
to win one of those.
Yes.
Um, you know what I'm saying? And then like the other thing is, say I set these races because it's pretty. I mean, you can almost tell what's going to count because it's pretty
Mhm.
much the same races every year, but not always. But say I say P and B is going to count and everyone doesn't go for some reason, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, then what?
Yeah.
Or what if a manufacturer's cup pops up
Mhm.
and everyone shows up? You know, what if someone decides to do a manufacturer's cup type event and every single driver's there? Then that should count. You know what I mean? Like, so my theory is rather than exclude anything, I'll just include everything.
Yeah, I
Doesn't
get
matter
that.
what it is. So that's the reasoning for it. And a lot of people say, oh, you should just, another argument would be on the same lines as just have a series, basically. Say these races count and it's a series. Well, again, you couldn't count Roar, you couldn't count the Euros, you couldn't count any of those things, which again, I think is up, part of a driver's full body work. You know what I mean? And so that's tough. And a ranking and a
They're
series
completely different.
ranking are completely different things. They do completely separate deals.
Mhm.
Because I've had people contact like, "Oh, I want top 25 to sponsor a race and it'll be the finale and whoever wins that's the best in the world." And I'm like, "But it doesn't have an end. There is no end.
Yeah.
It doesn't reset after that." So, they're just completely different things, but it would make it easier, but to me, I feel like it would make it easier for people to understand, but it would be less accurate.
Got
And I
you.
feel like I've tried to make all the decisions towards accuracy because I understand that it's really hard for people to understand,
Mhm.
but on how it all works and things like that. But I don't want to sacrifice accuracy, I guess.
How much of your time does this take up?
Um, the hardest part, it's not that bad. I've got it pretty good now. Um, Another question I get is like, when am I going to do the truggy and the electric side of things?
Mhm.
And it's like the initial data collection is the hardest part because finding results sucks.
Yes.
It's really, really difficult.
That's
I
how we
wish, and I don't have the ambition to do it, but I wish there was just a master website that had all the results. So you could look at in 2 seconds, you can look up who won the 2010 Nitro Challenge. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
you can't. You can look at pictures and someone will have the top 15, the names,
Trust me,
but
dude.
you don't know anyone else.
I
It's so hard.
I feel your pain just researching for
Yeah,
guests. It's, like,
it's
very hard.
it's hard. Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's a lot to manage. One of the things I screw up on all the time is when people make switches. It's like, whoa, dude! Like I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Like one of the most recent one is Walenka. Like I didn't know he left. There was no real announcement that he
Yeah.
left.
He
He was
kinda had,
just
like, a
gone.
nervous breakdown or something.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
but
but it was just over. You
but
know what I
I
mean?
get it. He was just like, "Yeah, I was number 1 S-Works driver, and now I'm motivated on, like, 6."
I
So,
know.
it sucks for him, man, it really does. Okay.
Yep.
Alright, so alright, I gotta ask this because I
Yeah.
I get some criticism for the podcast. Some guys don't like when I curse or whatever. I know Joseph loves criticism because he takes it so good, but how do you deal with the criticism? Because it's been some heated arguments on Facebook over this stuff. And
Yeah, I don't mind it actually because there's times when basically every single time I understand the criticism because there's things with rankings, whether it be college football, whether it be golf, tennis, whatever. Like, it's just the nature of the beast. No one's ever going to be happy. You know what I mean? So I
Mhm.
get that. But every single time I put in a race or, and input it in the thing and then it comes out and then I look at the new rankings, just like everyone else, it's new to me once I hit enter. So when that happens, I'm always like, what? How the hell that guy? How'd that even happen? And then I got to go back and look at the things, be like, okay, that makes sense. Now I get it. You know what I mean? So I understand, like, when people see things, it's like, what? How's that even possible? So I kind of like it in a way because it keeps me on my toes and it really, in my opinion, it solidifies my position and why things are the way they are. Or there's a possibility that someone will say something and be like, that's a good idea. I should do that. Like, JQ gave me a suggestion just recently, and I was like, it's a good idea. That's
Yeah,
something I should do.
he told me about
Um,
that.
yeah, and so that's something I want to implement. But the criticism can get old sometimes because the one thing that frustrates me is when someone says, I release new rankings and someone says, this list is shit. Okay, well, cool, dude. Like, right on. But what's your problem? Because obviously you see something you don't like. So
Mhm.
what is it? And I can explain to you how it got that way. You know what I mean? Usually, I mean, always, I can explain. It's maybe not always easy to understand, but like rather than just throwing out this is shit, I welcome to someone say, "How's it happen that Lutz wins this race and doesn't move up a spot?" I'm totally welcome to that, but like, don't just put a post out there. This is shit. Like that makes no sense to me.
Yeah,
You know?
I mean,
It,
I've been guilty of complaining about it too, but I've kind of
well, yeah,
just
but yeah, I mean, complaints. I understand. I get that. You know what I mean? Like, I would have complaints. I go back and double check myself because it doesn't seem right either. Sometimes, you know
yeah.
what I mean?
But I
But
also wanna
you know,
understand how it works, and, I kinda get it, and people get upset, "Well, why is this?" I'm just like, "Man, you guys gotta understand, like, this is how I can't fully explain it how it works, but I
yeah,
get it. I get it,
yeah.
and that's all it comes down
It's
to."
tricky. I've actually had, and I'm not going to say his name. I wanted to put him on blast at the time, but I don't want to be like that. So,
Mhm,
because I don't want to start any wars here. But I had a driver tell me that it was illegal, and he didn't want his name associated on that list. Period, no matter where he is.
hmm.
He's like, "Don't use my name for your list." And
Wow.
I was like, "Bro,
I'd
really?"
blast
But yet,
him.
but at the same time, that person eventually got to number one, and and then they were, all about promoting being number 1 ranked driver in the world, which I found ironic.
You're gonna have to tell me who that was when we get off the air, even though I wanna know.
I will off the record.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I
I thought it was hilarious. I
I
almost messaged him and said, "Hey, man, I thought you wanted off this thing."
I think I have a clue who it was, so we'll talk about that afterwards, but
All right.
alright, so what does the future look like? What do you want to happen with the top 25 here over the next few years? What's your goal?
I think a really good, there's a lot of goals that I would like to do, but realistically, as maybe as bad as this sounds, like I don't want to put the effort in because
Mhm.
I don't want it to be a lot of work. You know what I
Yes.
mean? Right now, it's kind of easy to manage, but what I would really, really like, which would be really too time consuming for me to do, is like I would like to have it set up where you have the top 25 rankings. Then you could click on the driver. You could see their little bio, who they race for, whatever, whatever. And then a list of what events they've actually attended and what those results were at that event.
Mhm.
And then one thing the World Golf Ranking site does, which is rad, and I'm not website savvy enough to even attempt this, but like it would be really cool to be able to be like, all right, I want to compare that driver to this driver because they can do that on the World Golf ones. And then it pulls them both up, looks at both their results, and it would be easier for people to understand, but it would be a lot of work.
Mhm.
And the suggestion JQ gave me was having uh showing where everyone finished at all these events, which that's not that unmanageable because it's really similar to what I'm showing on the back end that's used for the calculations. But
Mhm.
so that is manageable. But And I would really like to do the 10th scale, but it seems to be more challenging than I anticipated.
And then you have to get into all that stocks.
Yeah, fuck, I don't do that shit.
Yeah, that's not.
Because that's dumb. I don't. No offense to the stock people of the world, but like I just, it's about the premier classes.
Yes, it should be. I feel that.
Which is why I started with 8th scale, because it's the one worldwide class that is the top of the class, the Formula One of RC.
Nitro is the glory. I have nothing against stock. I just feel stock should be stock, but I guess it's for the tinkerers and they like to do all that stuff. I'm not got time for that. If I'm gonna race 10 scale, I want to race on AstroTurf, like I did in England. Put whatever motor I can on there and just send it without responsibility. With responsibility. Remember that. Send it with responsibility.
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
Responsibility.
Well, I mean, the top 25. At least we have something going. It gets people talking.
Yeah, and you know, I think one of the other complaints that I get, there's a couple of them, but one of the other complaints is like, I see people like, oh, this list is shit. It doesn't mean anything anyways. You know what I mean? And it's like, true, it has no meaning. And does it affect driver salaries? No, maybe, maybe not, probably not. You know what I mean? But what it is good for is those Josh Wheelers. Or a good example, Tebow was up there for a long time, and Tebow's like, oh, everybody's like, Tebow's on the outs, Tebow's on the outs, and you know, he's done the downhill slide. He's getting old, whatever. It's like, dude, Tebow was like still finishing in third every race he showed up to. Like, that's hard to do. You know what I mean? And so he was higher in the rankings and people probably would have expected him to be. But it's just, it's tough.
It is, man. You can't please everybody. You know, most of the times I have 99.9% of people talking to me about the podcast. They love it. They don't, I think people don't realize the time that goes into doing them. So I can imagine that it takes time to do what you're doing and to have somebody to criticize. And, you know, but I mean, Joseph was one of the biggest critical people about it. But hey, man, if it was easy, everybody would do it.
Yeah. And you know, I guess going back to you know, what does it mean? It doesn't mean anything. And like, what does it actually add to RC? I mean, people say whatever, you know, but like, I look at it like this, and it's, in my opinion, it's sad. It's sad for Gary Guest was another person that was one of those little mid-level dudes that never got respect. But I look at it like this: if you're David Ungaro, right, and you're telling your buddies, fucking 5 years from now, or 10 years from now, or whatever, or 20 years, who knows, but whatever, or just some guy that you meet. Oh, I race RC cars. Okay, cool. That's cool. Are you good at it? Yeah, I'm pretty good. You know what I mean? I'm pretty good. I won the Worlds, or say you haven't won a Worlds, and you're like, well, you know, I won Nitro Challenge, I won Silver State. That means zero to those people. They don't know what that is. You know what I mean? Even RCGP. Oh yeah, I won the RCGP. You know, it's like a World Series thing, but they don't know what it is. But every single person can understand. Forever, you can say, dude, yeah, like 5 years ago, I was the #1 ranked driver in the world. Everyone can associate what that actually means. You know what I mean? Whether it's 100% accurate or whether it's whatever, that's, if you don't believe it or whatever, and it's a ranking, so nothing's ever 100% accurate. But you know, that's something any person from anywhere understands. Yeah. I'm ranked this in the world, period. You know what I mean? And I think that holds a lot of value to Joe Blow in the world.
Yeah, I get it, man. I get it.
Yeah.
Hey,
because there's a lot of those guys, like you were talking, the old school guys we were talking earlier about, that people may not recognize their names, but you could say they're here in the world, and you're like, okay, well, that person was good.
Yeah, you know,
whether they were actually fifth or not.
That I actually got that from the last podcast, one of the podcasts just before this, with Jason Ashton. And people's like, well, I don't know who he is. It's like, dude, he was one of the fastest guys in the world at one point. Yeah, exactly. You know what I mean? He was like
another great example.
And people
never got the respect either.